Welcome back, gentlefolk and rapscallions of all persuasions. You are getting this setup today because when I say this is the worst book I've ever experienced, I'm not just saying it with my whole chest, I need my entire body. Buckle in, because I have not been this mad about a book on this channel since The Dead Take the A Train. And I spent a lot of time on fanfiction.net in the early 2000s. My Immortal looped fully back around and became campy, and I would take Ebony, Darkness, Dementia, Raven Way over Princess Marjoriana any day. Because this book, I know that right now it is fashionable to hate on Fourth Wing. If Fourth Wing is how you got into the fantasy genre, I'm not going to judge you for that. What I will judge you for is thinking that it is the height of literature, and I will judge Fourth Wing itself for bringing down the caliber of other books because bad writing is begetting bad writing. The premise of Warrior Princess Assassin is intriguing. It's a love triangle between an assassin and the two people that he sent to kill. What's not to like about that? The execution of it is so poor that I could not focus on anything else that was going on in the story because I was so distracted by how badly the pacing, chapter structure, and constant exposition were done. So, drew this all out on my whiteboard. Here's the TLDR on our major players. Princess Marjoriana. Her father has weather magic. Her brother, the heir, does not. He's also a massive dick. She also doesn't have weather magic, but she might be able to amplify or redirect magic that's around her. Unclear. That only comes into play in about the last third of the book, and still isn't really going anywhere. The assassin, Asher, is her childhood best friend, who is the son of one of her mother's ladies-in-waiting, and the lady-in-waiting was implicated in the queen's death, so he was exiled after his mother was executed. The warrior is Maddox Kai Ronan, who is only referred to as Kai in this book. His sister, Victoria, is developmentally suppressed, and they both have fire magic. They need armies because reasons. They need weather magic for their crops because they're failing because of the fire magic. And so they have an arranged marriage. Oh, and none of the three of these trust each other because the plot demands conflict. And everything that I just told you is everything that we get in this book. It's just repeated over and over again, just in case we forgot that his mother was implicated in the assassination of the queen, just in case we forgot that she grew up sheltered in a palace, just in case we forgot that he has fire magic and he was taken on campaign with his father because his sister was at home with nurses after his mother died in childbirth. Just in case we forgot any of that, it repeats every 3 chapters for the entire book. So chapter 1 starts out with Marjoriana, Jory, as she's referred to for the rest of the story, getting fitted for her wedding dress because, remember, arranged marriages, how could we forget? The whole thing is that they have an arranged marriage because they need armies and they need weather. I gotta simmer down. This is too early in the video for me to be this spicy. So, she's getting fitted for her wedding dress, and she decides to do a geopolitical info dump while she's getting fitted for her wedding dress, and I cared even less than I did about this than I did for the info dump when Violet is crossing the parapet in Fourth Wing, because Violet, the protagonist, it's first-person POV. If she falls to her death, we don't have a book. Both of these cases, I'm just like, bestie, we are less than 30 pages in. Make me care about your characters before you dump your war on me. Okay, thank you. In chapter 2, we have her flashing back on a memory with her childhood friend where he is telling her that she has no idea what is happening outside the palace. And even before this was repeated to death, I was just getting frustrated because she is a spoiled brat, and that's literally it. That's all the character development that she has. And it's not really making me care about your characters and making me want to continue the story. I knew from this point, like my read-along notes are, I already know that this is a book that's going to constantly tell me about the characters' tragic pasts. I did not realize how true and how bad that was going to be, and the only reason I finished it is to make this video for you right now. Chapter 3 is where we get introduced to Kai, and we get that backstory of the fire magic and the dead mother. And once again, info dump backstory before I care about your character. Like, show me anything that they are doing, anything that they are good at, any action and interaction they are taking with other human beings instead of being inside their own brain, sitting on the back of a horse, or getting fitted for a wedding dress, or whatever he was doing when he gets introduced. I don't even remember anymore. It doesn't matter. You need to have a character that intrigues me before I care about how they got to the person that they are today. So by the time we get to chapter 9 of this book, we find out that Asher has been given a sealed contract that, like, the only world building that they did is that the Assassin's Guild, if you get one of these sealed orders, you have to take it once you open it. And if you don't, then the price that the guild gets cut in half, and also hunters get sent after you. That's pretty much the only rule that's been introduced in this entire book. He, remember, childhood friend of the princess, gets this contract to kill both of them. And he's like, oh no, my best friend. And so he tries to get her to run, and then she's like, no, I'm not going to leave him behind. So then they kidnap him. That doesn't go over great, because they get like half a mile down the road, and then they go back to the palace. And then her brother, remember, the heir who is upset about the fact that he doesn't have magic and takes it out on everybody around him every moment, all the time, wants to put indentured servitude on him in an amount that he's never going to pay off. And he's like, no, I'm not going to let that happen. You still need this alliance with me. And he's like, okay, fine, whatever. And then all three of them go on a road trip to go back to Kai's kingdom. This book would have benefited so much from not having POV chapters for all of these characters, because when you have a novel and you have conflict, it benefits from telling the story from the point of view of the person who has the least information and needs to figure things out. That doesn't mean that the audience also has the least information, because there's narrative tension that occurs when the audience knows something and the character doesn't. In some cases, that is dramatic irony, depending on how the story is going, but in general, that's just good storytelling. None of that happens here. In fact, the two of them, when they're plotting to run away, chapter 7 finishes up with her POV, and then the first couple of sentences of chapter 8 are the exact same thing from his perspective. And that's not the only time this happens. This happens multiple times in this book. Take a moment here to harp on the prose a little bit, because there's a point during their whole failed escape attempt where they have to go through a sewer, and she's just like, surely being hung would be better than this. Hanged. You mean hanged. I'm being pedantic, but it's something that bothered me. Also, there's a part where Kai calls one of his group of soldiers that are all functionally identical because none of them have any interactions or character development or anything at all that makes them unique people. I just threw 5 little stick figure dudes up here because that's all that they are in the story. Anyway, he calls one of them the most unforgiving. You could have just said the least forgiving. You really could. If I ever meet this editor who did this book, it's going to be on site. Oh, and remember the whole premise of the story about the assassin being sent to kill both of them, and the fact that if he doesn't, other hunters were going to get sent after them? Yeah, I think the author just forgot that she had that in there, because it's talked about like everything else in this book, but nobody ever does anything about it. It's just on a road trip, going back to his kingdom. Oh, and I think that I forgot to mention up until this point that the kingdom with the fire magic is called Incendar. No points for originality there. So because they're doing this whole road trip plot, the actual story, if there even is any at all, starts about halfway through at chapter 16 out of 36, because in the renegotiation of everything, and Kai is like, no, she's got to come and live in my country for a month so that she knows the people that she's going to be a part of and can negotiate this treaty effectively. So that's why they're all on this road trip. And some more of my read-along notes, the only thing that was giving me life in the story at this point was the flirtation between these two, because the love triangle ends up being a throuple. There, I spoiled it for you. You're not reading this book anyway, because I read it so you don't have to. There's more repetition, because There's the declaration and reiteration of the significance of them crossing the border into his country and him telling the border guards to use lethal force on anybody that follows them. And she's like, I am cut off from my people for good or for ill. And that repeats over and over again. And chapter 23, we have Jory sitting there, and she's like, as we've traveled, I've started to pay attention to his men, and I'm going to proceed to info dump and tell you about the one singular individual characteristic that each one of these has that doesn't ever matter because you never see them do anything that requires us to know about those character traits at all. One of them starts hooking up with her handmaiden that's along on the journey. Callum, I think is his name. I'm thinking of Atlas 6 and Callum and Tristan. Tristan is not a character in here, but I'm definitely thinking that because even Atlas 6 had more enjoyable characters than this, and that is a low, low bar. A couple more infuriating things that happened with phrasing. Asher sprung to the ground. Sprung to the ground? What? How do you spring to the ground? I thought that maybe that was just a mistake, but no. As we do, when we switch to POVs of the people who are in the same room with each other, it gets repeated from Kai's point of view, saying, Asher sprung to the ground. Okay, guess words don't have meanings anymore, and you can just throw them wherever you want. And then there's a bit where Kai is showing Jory his powers, and he's like, it's real fire, it'll burn whatever it touches, and she's like, boop, ah! Surprise Pikachu face, my hand is burning because I stuck it in some fire. Aside from the fact that I need my phone for everyday life, I'm frequently tempted to throw it when books do things like this. And then, chapter 27 of 36, we find out, oh, maybe this whole thing is more complicated than we realized because of the countryside burning. The only person introduced and not exposited to death the moment we hear about them, Victoria. 3 guesses what's causing all the fires in the countryside that are a problem for Kai's kingdom. Yep, it's the developmentally suppressed sister with the fire magic that just lashes out. She's an obscurus for fire magic for this world, and it just pops up everywhere. So that's why there's like half of a chapter where it's like, oh, maybe we don't know everything, and then Jory goes and has a conversation with the village people that are attacking them as they're making their way through, and she doesn't even talk to really anybody that was doing the attacking. She's talking to their kids, and then she comes back and gives the whole explanation of why they're upset, and he already knows because their land is burning down. Like, do you want a cookie, sweetie, for talking to the kids and finding out that everybody's mad because their food is burning down? I swear this whole book was written like a Mad Lib. I'm so emotion. It's so adjective. I can't verb the last time I actioned. For 120,000 words, I'm going to guess, because on average you can estimate about 8,000 words of content for every hour. This was a 15-hour audiobook that I listened to on 1.7 speed, and that's still like 8-9 hours of my life I'm never getting back. I know it's a truth universally acknowledged on the internet that we lament that Avatar: The Last Airbender never had a live-action movie adaptation, but if anybody remembers that non-existent live-action movie adaptation, the fight with the Earthbenders, where everybody who's not directly involved in the fight is just standing around waiting for their cue to jump in and start fighting, that is what this book feels like. There's no sense that anything is happening outside the personal experience of one of our 3 main characters, because nobody has any agency, nobody does anything, functionally interchangeable soldiers. The only thing that is happening with her, outside of anything that's going on, is the countryside catching on fire. The Hunters Guild, not doing anything. Anybody related to her, not doing anything, except her... Spoiler alert, if you didn't already figure this out from the moment this was up on the board, her brother is the one that hired the Assassin's Guild to kill both of them. That information comes from the handmaid Charlotte, who is dying after an ambush attack in the palace in Zendar. I don't know what kind of person this book is for. There are 5-star reviews for it, so obviously some people like it. But this is not a book for people who want a world to sink into. There is no world to sink into. I sincerely apologize for what I said in my review of The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo, where I said the world building felt a little thin, and if I looked too hard, I would see that everything was a set piece on a stage, because all the set pieces in this story are made out of cardboard. It is that thin. This isn't even a book for people who like to read a chapter or two at night before going to bed. The only possible way that the amount of detail repetition in this story makes any sense at all is if the only reading that you do is 1 singular hour per week while your child is doing some sort of extracurricular activity. Because if it takes you 3 weeks to loop back around to one of these key plot points, and I'm using plot loosely here, it's been 3 weeks. Maybe you need a little bit of a refresher. If you are somebody who reads a book in any sort of reasonable amount of time, this ain't it. I don't know what this is, but this ain't it. We do have the two of them meet Victoria, because Kai goes to visit his sister, and the two of them are like, oh, surely the order to stay in our rooms doesn't apply to us. And so they sneak out and they find him, and then he's like, no, it's fine, you can stay, but don't say anything and don't touch anything. And she is going through like these little glass squares that have patterns on them, and she's like, this one's missing. And he knows full well that it's not missing and that she's going to find it eventually, and he's like, no, you're going to find it. She, sitting here, goes, oh, it's right over there. You had one job, and it was to sit down and shut up. And you couldn't even do that. This isn't a romance because it doesn't hit any of the story beats of a romance, and you can't even excuse it by calling it a slow burn because they all just fall into a lust pile at the end. And it's not a fantasy because while there's a suggestion of magic, there's no rules or consequences, no religion, barely any geopolitics, because he's apparently appeasing a third nation called Dragonis by having both of them assassinated. So presumably a 5-minute conversation is going to be dragged out to fill the plot of the second book. I refuse to call this romantasy because it doesn't even do half of what one of those things would.
And I like less than half of you half as well as you deserve.
And the worst part in the dystopian hellscape that is book publishing in the year 2025, this atrocity was penned by a New York Times best-selling author. I wish that I could accuse this book of being written by AI. I really wish that I could. But I took the basic premise of a love triangle between an assassin and the two people that he's sent to kill, and like the most basic bit about weather magic, fire magic, they need armies, they need crops. Put it into ChatGPT. The first unadvised, unmanipulated outline for a book that it spit out had more action, conflict, and plot than this did. To call this, or to compare this to AI slop, is an insult to the actually talented writers that have had all of their works ripped off to train the large language model. This is the first book in a trilogy. In a trilogy. This was 120,000 words. This was half of an order of Phoenix of manure that doesn't exist in this world because the Weather King just uses magic on their crops. Needless to say, I will not be finishing out this trilogy, I guess, unless this video gets an obscene amount of engagement and you just like to see me suffer. So do all those delicious things that feed the almighty algorithm, like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.